The lecture hall aboard Orbital Academy Station, Theta 9, was designed to accommodate nearly every known species in the Coalition. Rows of levitating platforms replaced chairs, shifting in size and shape to suit bodies made of gas, chitin, or fluid. The walls shimmered with adaptive screens, displaying environmental data and atmospheric balances for each student. It was a marvel of engineering, safe, controlled, predictable, which was exactly why the human felt out of place. Elias Varn stood near the rear, leaning casually against a support column, his expression neutral but his eyes observant. Around him, clusters of alien students chatted in a dozen frequencies, clicks, hums, telepathic pulses translated into soft tones by the station's systems. "Ian, they call it a death world," one of them said. Its voice translated into crisp galactic standard. The speaker, a tall, slender being from the Lysari Collective, flicked its iridescent tendrils in amusement. "A planet where even the microbes try to kill you." A ripple of laughter spread. Another voice chimed in, this one belonging to a bulky, four-armed Vectari. "I read their oceans are filled with predators larger than transport ships, and they willingly enter them for leisure." More laughter followed, louder now. Elias didn't react. He'd heard it all before. "Imagine evolving under such inefficient conditions," the Lysari continued. "Constant danger, unpredictable climates, unstable ecosystems. It's no wonder they're so crude." "Primitive," corrected another. "Reckless," added a third. Someone finally noticed Elias. "Oh, apologies," the Lysari said, though its tone suggested otherwise. "No offense intended, human." "None taken," Elias replied evenly. "Is it true," the Vectari leaned forward, its four eyes narrowing with curiosity, "that your species lacks basic environmental safeguards? That your young are exposed to hazards during development?" Elias shrugged. "Depends what you call hazards. Gravity alone on your world exceeds Coalition safety limits," another student added. "Your atmospheric composition contains reactive oxygen. Your fauna is aggressive. Your flora produces toxins. Statistically, your survival rate should be negligible. And yet," Elias said, "here I am." A few students chuckled, but the tone remained mocking. At the front, Professor Halvex arrived, crystalline body refracting light. "Today's module is Comparative Environmental Adaptation. We will examine Terra as our case study." A murmur spread. "We will also conduct a controlled simulation." Relief spread instantly. Elias, however, just sighed softly. "Of course," Professor Halvex continued, "all parameters will remain within Coalition safety standards." Relieved murmurs followed immediately, tension dissolving across the hall. The alien students relaxed, returning to their quiet confidence. Safe meant predictable, and predictable meant manageable. Elias, however, raised a single eyebrow. "However," Halvex added, crystalline form glinting under the station lights, "we have invited a guest assistant to oversee today's simulation." The side door slid open with a soft hiss. A human woman stepped inside. She moved with calm precision. Her posture relaxed but alert, as if she were constantly measuring the room without appearing to. A faint scar traced along her jawline, a detail that immediately drew curious glances from several students. Her uniform was simple, unadorned, but carried a quiet authority that the others could not quite interpret. "This is Instructor Mara Cade," Halvex announced. "Former survival specialist. She will guide today's lesson." Mara gave a short nod. "Morning." A few students exchanged looks. "Another Deathworlder," the Lysari said softly, tendrils flicking again. "Lucky you," Mara replied dryly. The simulation began. The walls flickered, dissolving into dense greenery. Within seconds, the lecture hall was gone, replaced by a thick Terran jungle. The air became heavy, saturated with humidity that clung to skin and surfaces alike. Strange sounds filled the environment, buzzing, chirping, distant rustling. Several students immediately recoiled. "Environmental pressure increased by 40%, Halvex narrated. "Temperature, 34 degrees Celsius. Atmospheric oxygen, 21%. My sensors are detecting airborne toxins," one student said, voice tightening. "Correct," Mara replied, stepping forward through the undergrowth. "Pollen, spores, microbial particles, harmless at this level."
"Harmless?"
the Vectari snapped. "My filtration systems are already strained." "Then don't breathe so deep," Elias muttered. A few students shot him irritated looks. Lesson 1, Mara said, turning slightly as she scanned the surroundings. Unpredictability. On Earth, the environment doesn't adjust to you. A sudden rustling echoed through the dense foliage. The entire group froze. What was that? The Lissari whispered. Mara didn't answer. The bushes exploded outward as a predator lunged. Muscle, teeth, speed. Panic erupted instantly. Students scattered, some trying to activate personal shields only to find them unresponsive. Safety systems are offline, one screamed. Mara stepped forward without hesitation. Grabbing a thick branch, she struck the creature sharply across its snout. It recoiled with a snarl and retreated into the jungle. Silence fell. You disabled safety protocols? Halvex asked. Partially, Mara replied calmly. Otherwise they wouldn't learn. The students stood frozen, their earlier confidence completely shattered. The jungle no longer felt like a controlled simulation. It felt alive, unpredictable, and hostile. Lesson 2, Mara continued, tossing the branch aside. Threat response. On Earth, hesitation gets you killed. I was not prepared, the Lissari admitted, its tendrils trembling visibly now. Exactly, Mara replied. Before anyone could respond further, the environment shifted again. The jungle dissolved into a rocky coastline. Harsh winds slammed into them, carrying the scent of salt and water. Waves crashed violently against jagged rocks, sending sprays high into the air. The ground beneath them was uneven and dangerously slick. Gravity remains constant, Halvex said. Tidal simulation at moderate intensity. One student immediately slipped, barely managing to stabilize itself. This terrain is unstable, it cried. Welcome to normal, Elias said calmly. Mara pointed toward the raging ocean. Lesson 3, the unknown. Something massive moved beneath the surface. A dark shadow passed under the water, far too large to identify clearly. The students instinctively stepped back. You expect us to go into that? The Vectari demanded. No, Mara replied. I expect you to understand that humans do. Why? Elias gave a small shrug. Curiosity, food, sometimes fun. Fun? Several voices repeated in disbelief. A powerful wave surged forward without warning, slamming into the rocks and knocking several students off balance. One nearly fell before scrambling back. Adapt, Mara said firmly. Or fall. The storm intensified rapidly. Dark clouds formed overhead, thunder echoing as rain poured down in heavy sheets. Wind howled across the coastline, reducing visibility and making movement even harder. This exceeds safe simulation levels, one student shouted over the storm. This, Mara said, raising her voice slightly, is a mild day on Earth. Elias laughed under his breath. Lesson 4, she continued, walking steadily despite the storm. Endurance. The environment doesn't stop. You either keep going or you fail. The students were already struggling, not from injury but from overload. Every second brought a new challenge. Wind, water, unstable footing, limited visibility. Their systems weren't built for constant stress layered on top of itself. One by one, they began to falter. Mara observed them carefully, then turned her gaze toward Elias. Your turn, she said. Elias stepped forward without hesitation. As he did, the storm faded, the crashing waves dissolving into silence. The world shifted again, transforming into a vast desert stretching endlessly in all directions. Heat pressed down immediately, intense and unforgiving. The sun blazed overhead, its light reflecting harshly off the sand. Hydration levels decreasing across all participants, Halvex announced. The students reacted almost instantly. There is no visible water source, one said, voice strained. This environment is unsustainable, another added. Elias crouched, picking up a handful of sand. He let it slip slowly through his fingers, watching the grains fall. No water here, the Lissari said weakly. Not on the surface, Elias replied. He stood and began walking without explaining further. Where are you going? The Vectari called out. Somewhere better. There was hesitation, but eventually they followed. The heat grew more oppressive with each step. Movement became harder. Several students slowed, their bodies clearly not adapted for such conditions. Minutes passed. Then more. A few collapsed, not injured, but overwhelmed by the sustained environmental pressure. Elias didn't stop. Finally, he reached a cluster of rocks partially buried in the Arimal. He knelt and began clearing sand from a shallow depression. "Watch," he said simply. From his pocket, he pulled a small piece of cloth. Stretching it over the depression, he placed a small stone in the center, creating a slight dip. The students watched closely, confused at first. Slowly, condensation began forming underneath the cloth. "A solar still," Elias explained. "Basic survival technique." The Vectari stared. "You carry tools for this?" Elias shook his head. "Not tools, knowledge." Mara gave a small, approving nod. "Lesson 5, she said, stepping beside him. "Adaptation isn't about making the environment safe. It's about knowing how to survive when it isn't." The students said nothing. For the first time since the lesson began, there was no resistance. No mocking tone, only silence filled with realization. The desert shimmered around them as the simulation reached its end. And just like that, everything disappeared. The lecture hall returned in an instant, its clean, controlled environment feeling almost unnatural after the intensity of the simulation. The levitating platforms reformed beneath each student, adjusting automatically as if nothing had happened. But everything had changed. The room was silent. No one laughed this time. No one whispered. The same students who had mocked Earth just moments ago now sat still, processing what they had experienced. Their movements were slower, more deliberate, as if their understanding of reality itself had shifted. The Lissari finally raised its tendrils, though they no longer flicked with amusement. "Human, Elias," it said quietly. Elias glanced over. "Yeah? I misjudged your species." Elias shrugged lightly. "It happens. You exist in constant instability," the Lissari continued. "Your world is filled with variables beyond acceptable limits. And yet, you function within it." "Function?" Mara said, folding her arms slightly. "We don't just function. We survive," Elias added. The Vectari looked between them. "No," it said slowly. "It is more than survival. You adapt continuously. You anticipate threats. You endure conditions that would overwhelm most species." A quiet murmur of agreement followed. Professor Halveck stepped forward, crystalline structure shimmering with subtle intensity. "This lesson has provided valuable insight. The resilience of Terran life forms exceeds prior academic models." "Terrifying," one student whispered. Elias smirked faintly. "You get used to it." The Lissari hesitated before speaking again. "Is all of your planet like this?" Mara exchanged a brief glance with Elias. "Worse," she said plainly. A pause followed. Then, cautiously, the Lissari asked, "Would it be advisable to visit?" Elias smiled slightly. "Sure." The room leaned in. "Just don't expect it to be safe." A few students let out nervous laughs, very different from before. As the class began to disperse, the atmosphere had completely changed. There was no trace of mockery left, only respect, and something else, caution. Mara watched them leave, then looked at Elias. "Think they learned it?" Elias nodded. "They learned why we don't need safety lessons." Mara smirked faintly. "Because for us," she said, "every lesson is unsafe," Elias finished.